Absolutely. Here's section 1. The band that changed everything, expanded to at least 700 words. Hashtag section 1. The band that changed everything. The Galactic Concord was supposed to usher in a new era of peace, cooperation, and prosperity across the stars. For most species, it did. But for humanity, its entry into the Concord marked the beginning of an identity crisis and the spark of an unexpected evolution. It all started with the Treaty of Lyra 9, the foundational agreement of the Concord. Among its long list of galactic laws and mutual understandings was one clause that would come to haunt humanity more than any other: no kinetic firearms in spacefaring vessels or off-world colonies. The reasoning was simple and widely accepted. A single bullet in the vacuum of space could rupture a ship's hull, cause a chain reaction in an orbital habitat, or compromise a terraforming dome's pressure integrity. Projectile-based weaponry, especially those operating with combustion or high-speed mass, were seen as too volatile and primitive for the fragile ecosystems of advanced interstellar civilizations. Most species didn't blink at the clause. Many had long since evolved past such weaponry, or had never invented it at all. Some relied on energy-based tools, gravitational manipulation, biological deterrence, or cybernetic defense systems. Guns, in the traditional human sense, were a relic to them, a brutish tool from an era of unrefined violence. To them, the ban was merely common sense. But to humanity, it was blasphemy. From the flintlock pistols of pirates to the precision sniper rifles of the 22nd century orbital rangers, guns weren't just tools of war. They were symbols of freedom, of self-defense, of power. They were the great equalizers in history, the iconic silhouettes in every human revolution. Fictional heroes carried them. Real ones used them. Entire military doctrines were based around their application. Firearms were woven into the very fabric of human identity. So when the ban was enforced, no exceptions, no loopholes, humanity felt the ground shift beneath its boots. It wasn't just a tactical change. It was a cultural earthquake. Earth's military infrastructure reeled. Decades, even centuries of training, manufacturing, and strategy had revolved around guns in one form or another. Nations scrambled to rearm their off-world forces with approved tech, mostly low-impact energy disablers, stun fields, and repulsor gear. These were effective, sure, but sterile. Impersonal. They lacked the immediacy, the reliability, and, to many soldiers, the soul of traditional weapons. Colonies protested. Settlers in fringe systems, vulnerable to raiders, felt exposed without their kinetic arsenals. "You want me to fight off pirates with a flashlight that tickles them?" one angry Martian farmer yelled during a public transmission that went viral. The sentiment echoed across a dozen systems. Even Earth's elite forces, the best-trained operatives humanity had ever produced, found themselves at a disadvantage during their early Concord peacekeeping missions. Pirate clans and fringe rebel factions, already skirting Concord law, retained contraband weaponry, often hidden in bulk freighters or disguised as mining gear. When firefights broke out, human forces were forced into close quarters with little more than non-lethal tools and riot gear. Losses piled up. Morale plummeted. The psychological blow was immense. Humans weren't used to feeling obsolete. Other species started making jabs. Diplomats from the Caroni, a crystalline species known for their gravity traps, mocked human reliance on primitive explosions. The insectoid Jicthal laughed at humanity's bang sticks, calling them noisy and ineffective in modern warfare. It wasn't just humiliation, it was humiliation on an interstellar scale. But if there was one thing history had proven, it was that humans, when cornered, mocked, and underestimated, adapted. Earth scientists, engineers, and strategists went into overdrive. If they couldn't bring guns, they would bring everything else. Military think tanks revived old ideas, dusted off ancient techniques, and merged them with cutting-edge technology. It wasn't about firepower anymore. It was about creativity, about unpredictability, about rewriting the rules the galaxy thought were unchangeable. Special forces units were retrained. Not in shooting, but in boarding tactics, stealth insertions, and close-quarters combat. Exosuits were redesigned for zero-gravity grappling. Materials engineers developed blade alloys that could pierce through hull-rated armor without risking decompression. Entire factories pivoted from bullet casings to composite melee weaponry. And most importantly, Earth's mindset began to change. No longer did humanity see the ban as a weakness. It became a challenge, a crucible, a proving ground for the oldest truth in human history. When you take something from us, we don't whine, we adapt, and we come back stronger. The Concorde's attempt to limit human warfare was about to backfire spectacularly, because in trying to cage the beast, they'd only given it more room to evolve. The galaxy had taken away humanity's favorite toy. Now, it was about to find out what happened when humans played by their own rules. Would you like me to continue with Section 2 next? Absolutely. Here is Section 2. Adaptation. The rise of non-firearm combat tech, expanded to meet your 700-word minimum. Hashtag Section 2. Adaptation. The rise of non-firearm combat tech. At first, it looked like a massive tactical regression. Without their cherished firearms, humanity's once proud military forces seemed like a relic compared to the energy-shielded and graviton-wielding militaries of other Concorde species. But what the galaxy didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, was that humans thrive when the rules are broken. And now they were playing a different game entirely. The shift began small. One elite task force, the Martian Reclaimers, refused to use Concorde standard stun batons and low-energy pulse rifles. They feel like toys, their commander said. Instead, they dusted off an old Earth tradition, the blade. Forged from nanocomposite alloys stronger than tungsten and sharpened to monomolecular edges, the swords the Reclaimers carried weren't ceremonial. They were brutal, elegant tools made for silent, controlled violence. These weren't just weapons, they were statements. Humanity didn't need a trigger to be deadly. A sharp edge and a determined will were enough. When a Reclaimer squad took back a hijacked supply freighter using nothing but reinforced melee gear, close-quarter zero-G maneuvers, and a tactical drone swarm, the galaxy noticed. More importantly, humanity noticed. The old ways could work, not in spite of the modern battlefield, but because of it. And so began what historians now call the Renaissance of Terran warcraft. Combat training academies across Earth and its colonies were overhauled. Ancient fighting styles were reintroduced. From Japanese kenjutsu to Filipino eskrima, from Norse axework to medieval longsword techniques, every viable melee tradition was studied, modernized, and adapted for low and zero-gravity conditions. To support this, new weapons were born. Maghammers, electromagnetically boosted war hammers capable of delivering bone-shattering blows even in zero-G. Gravhooks, dual-purpose climbing and grappling tools that could latch onto enemy armor and yank them mid-combat. Pulse glaives, hybrid energy melee polearms that used controlled shockwaves to paralyze or disorient before slicing through armor. Monowhips, ultra-fine strands of carbon-laced filament stored in wrist gauntlets, used like razors to sever limbs and slice through metal silently. And then came the revival of the bow. Traditionalists scoffed at first. A bow? In space? But when redesigned with carbon fiber flexion arms, gyroscopic stabilizers, and compressed gas propellants, modern Terran bows became deadly silent launchers of specialized payloads. Arrows were tipped with micro-EMP nodes, high-frequency disruptors, or even chemical tracers designed to stick, signal, or blind. With no recoil and minimal energy emissions, they were perfect for stealth assaults aboard spacecraft or within station corridors. In zero-gravity boarding missions, where split-second silence and precision meant survival, nothing was as effective as a Reclaimer with a rail sling, a glove-mounted, manually loaded magnetic accelerator that fired discs, spikes, or custom payloads at short range. Technically not a firearm. Technically not against the Concorde rules. And terrifyingly efficient. But the real shift wasn't in hardware, it was in mindset. Humanity embraced versatility over brute force. Instead of relying on single-purpose weapons, Earth soldiers trained with multifunction tools. A tactical axe might double as a breaching device, a plasma welder, and a communications disruptor. A gauntlet might shield against shrapnel, control a drone swarm, and house a retractable blade. Drones, in particular, became game changers. Miniaturized and programmable, these machines didn't violate Concorde bans. They didn't fire bullets. They flew into enemies, hacked doors, released sonic pulses, or deployed non-lethal gas. Swarm tactics, borrowed from nature and enhanced with AI, turned human operatives into living command hubs. A single specialist could control a cloud of helper bots that scouted, attacked, healed, or distracted with terrifying precision. Humans also leaned into biological augmentation. Not full cybernetics, those were restricted by Concorde ethics, but subtle upgrades. Neural dampeners for faster reflexes. Oxygen cycling mods for extended EVA combat. Muscle thread reinforcements to allow one-handed axe swings in 0G. To other species, it looked barbaric. To humans, it was just pragmatic evolution. Combat styles also changed. Human martial arts fused with 0G physics. New forms like orbital jujitsu and vacuum kinetics emerged, focused on using inertia, rotational momentum, and magnetic boots to dominate foes in floating environments. Human soldiers became dancers of destruction, tumbling, grappling, spinning in midair with terrifying grace. And most frightening to alien observers was human psychological warfare. Without gunfire to announce their presence, humans learned to become ghosts. They used sonic nullifiers to move in silence. Holographic projectors to appear where they weren't. Misdirection, confusion, and intimidation were their tools. Some teams deployed howlers, devices that emitted predator sounds native to enemy homeworlds. Others used mimicry, replicated enemy languages mid-combat, or jammed personal comms with looping screams. The battlefield became not just a place of combat, but of fear. First came the myths. Whispers of black-armored humans tearing through pirate ships with blades and brute strength. Of silent teams appearing in blink space, slaughtering crews without firing a single shot. Aliens began calling them names. Void stalkers, the gray knives meet ghosts. And then came the respect. Because for all their brutality, humans didn't just fight. They won. Every time. What began as an embarrassment, humanity stripped of their beloved weapons, had turned into a crucible, a proving ground. And by fire, sweat, and blood, humanity had emerged as something new. The galaxy took away their guns. Humanity gave them something much worse in return. Ready for Section 3? Infamy and the HFY moment? Absolutely. Here's Section 3. Infamy and the HFY moment, expanded to over 700 words. Hashtag Section 3. Infamy and the HFY moment. By the time the rest of the galaxy realized what had happened, it was too late. What had started as a concession, no firearms in space, had transformed humanity into something far more dangerous than any Concorde tribunal had anticipated. Without bullets, without recoil, without the false security of long-range engagements, humanity had become personal, immediate, terrifyingly present. And the galaxy noticed. The first true shockwave came with the Valkyrie incident, now studied in military academies across dozens of systems. The Valkyrie were a warrior race, tall, tusked reptilians with rigid honor codes and ceremonial battle traditions. Armed with plasma blades and graph-suspended war sleds, they considered themselves unmatched in close-quarters combat. When they intercepted a human supply convoy near the neutral zone of Elter Prime, they expected an easy fight. The convoy had minimal escort and no registered firearms, in accordance with Concorde law. It should have been a straightforward raid. Instead, it became legend. The humans didn't call for help. They didn't retreat. They boarded. In complete silence, under the cover of ECM clouds and refracted light emitters, the 13th Void Lance, a special operations unit trained in vacuum melee tactics, breached the Valkyrie flagship through its lower cargo hold. Within 7 minutes, the bridge had been taken, the crew incapacitated or dead, and the ship under human control. All without firing a single projectile. Survivors spoke of shadows that moved faster than their eyes could follow. Of curved blades slicing through armor. Of small, spider-like drones that latched onto joints and detonated with localized EMP bursts. Of zero-G fighters who spun through the air like living stars, disarming, disabling, and, when necessary, eviscerating. The footage leaked within hours. The galaxy couldn't believe it. 13 human operatives had taken down a warship crewed by nearly 200. It was the HFY moment. Asterisk humanity. Fuck yeah. Asterisk. The moment the galaxy understood the price of its own arrogance. They had taken away humanity's guns, believing it would make them safe. But it only pushed humans to innovate beyond imagination. Within weeks, stories spread across the Concord like wildfire. Pirates began abandoning raids when they detected Terran signatures. Mercenary guilds updated their policies to include no engagement with unarmed humans unless confirmed at distance. Even some military factions began seeking black market copies of human melee tech. But the worst and most telling reaction came from the Concord itself. Nervous whispers in the Concord council chambers turned into emergency meetings. Proposals were drafted to reconsider the firearm ban, not because they believed humans should have guns, but because what they'd created without them was too terrifying to allow unchecked. It wasn't just the tools. It was the attitude. Humans didn't mourn the loss of firearms anymore. They mocked it. Posters appeared in outposts across human space. Banned guns? Cool. Here's a chain's word. No bullets? No problem. Peace through superior creativity. Recruitment spiked. Young humans, who once saw military service as a slow, rigid path, flocked to new programs teaching zero-G melee tactics, exo-armor engineering, and psychological warfare. There was no greater honor than joining the knife teams, the elite units who moved like specters and struck like legends. Among these were squads with names that became infamous across the stars. The Hellwalkers, frontline breachers clad in reactive exo-armor and wielding energized thermal axes. The Silent Chorus, operatives trained in synchronized movement and neural-linked combat who executed boarding maneuvers with balletic precision. The Voidborn, rumored to be vat-grown in orbital labs, cyber-enhanced and cold as the stars themselves. Even other humans weren't sure they were entirely natural. And with them came the artisans of war, those who forged the weapons, built the armor, and designed the drones. No longer were weapons simply mass-produced tools. Each blade, each gauntlet, each drone was a handcrafted masterpiece, often tailored to its user. Some had embedded AI, whispering enemy patterns mid-battle. Others emitted unique harmonic frequencies to disrupt shields or trigger motion sickness in alien opponents. This era was not just a military transformation. It was a cultural renaissance. The very identity of humanity evolved. Children grew up idolizing tacticians and armorsmiths more than gunfighters. Training simulations in orbiting academies taught hand-to-hand gravity combat and energy disarmament as basic curriculum. Music, fashion, and even religion began to integrate the new human warrior ethos: discipline, adaptability, creativity. "We are not defined by our weapons," a Terran general once said, but by our refusal to be disarmed. Even alien cultures couldn't look away. Some species began adopting Terran methods poorly. Their physiology didn't favor close quarters. Their minds weren't wired for improvisation. They lacked the recklessness, the nerve, the sheer audacity. They had never needed to fight this way. But now they had to. And so, in a strange twist of fate, the Concord's band didn't suppress human aggression. It refined it, distilled it, weaponized it in a way that no one, not even humans themselves, could have predicted. Humanity was no longer seen as a liability in Concord operations. They became the standard bearers. Not just for violence, but for how to reimagine it. They were no longer the brutes from the backwater planet who shot first and asked questions never. They were artists now, and the battlefield was their canvas. The only thing scarier than a human with a gun, it turned out, was a human without one. And the galaxy would never forget it. Would you like to jump into Section 4, Legacy, humanity's place in the new galactic order next? Absolutely. Here's Section 4, Legacy, Humanity's Place in the New Galactic Order, with over 700 words. Hashtag Section 4, Legacy, Humanity's Place in the New Galactic Order. In the centuries that followed the Treaty of Lyra 9, historians would agree on one thing. Banning firearms in space was the single greatest catalyst for humanity's transformation. Not because it made them weaker, but because it forced them to reach deeper into their nature, to evolve, not away from violence, but through it. And in doing so, they didn't just change themselves. They changed the galaxy. At first, the Concorde tried to contain the spread. Attempts were made to restrict certain technologies, energy blades, impact gauntlets, adaptive exosuits. Sanctions were placed on Terran research hubs specializing in non-projectile lethality. But every attempt to suppress innovation was met with something uniquely human. Workarounds. You banned smart whips. Humans invented collapsible energy pikes that disguised themselves as mining equipment. You outlawed disposable drone swarms?
Fine.
We'll use regenerative fungal drones that grow in ship corridors and release pheromone-guided microknives. Every new rule became a dare. Every limitation became an art project. Soon, Concorde enforcement officers began calling it the Terran loophole syndrome, the tendency for humans to exploit the letter of the law while gleefully demolishing its spirit. But no one could argue with the results. When human units were deployed, whether against pirates, hostile rogue species, or containment breaches, the results were consistent, swift, brutal, and efficient. Yet it wasn't just about warfare anymore. Human combat philosophy began bleeding into other areas of galactic life. Their emphasis on adaptability and lateral thinking began influencing alien cultures, especially younger ones. On planets like Ressus 4 and the moon colonies of Narjalai, alien youths began training in human martial disciplines. Terran academies sprang up in neutral sectors, their instructors part soldier, part philosopher, teaching a code that blended ancient Earth traditions with modern spacefaring ethics. Some saw it as cultural imperialism. Others saw it as enlightenment. For better or worse, humanity had become the new apex influence. And with influence came responsibility. In a stunning reversal of previous policy, the Concorde High Council, once so eager to suppress Terran methods, created the Tactical Innovation Exchange, a coalition of species dedicated to studying and sharing non-lethal and non-projectile combat advancements. The catch? The first chair was given to a human. Not a politician, not a diplomat, but a scarred, one-eyed operative named Captain Alira Kane, retired commander of the infamous Void Lancers. Under Kane's leadership, the exchange didn't just share blueprints. It became a think tank, a place where strategy, ethics, and philosophy merged. And at its heart was a single unifying belief. Conflict, when inevitable, must be met with creativity, not repetition. This idea spread fast. Alien empires that had grown stagnant began reassessing their tactics. Civilizations previously reliant on automated drone fleets or single-minded AI began emphasizing flexible command structures. The very definition of warfare evolved, from predictable algorithmic clashes to fluid, near-artistic engagements. War, one siren tactician wrote, is no longer a contest of strength. It is a gallery, and the Terrans are its most celebrated artists. But with fame came fear. There remained those who distrusted humanity, species who whispered that the Terran rise was not evolution, but corruption. That humans, now untethered from traditional weaponry, had become unpredictable, uncontrollable, even post-militaristic predators. Some conspiracy theories claimed that deep in the Sol system, humanity was developing new forms of warfare, so advanced they defied classification. Rumors swirled of quantum duels, of emotion-triggered weapons, of language-based attacks that could collapse an enemy's will with a sentence. Theories most likely. But with humans no one could be certain. Yet through it all, humanity did something few expected. They didn't conquer. They didn't rule. They taught. Terran diplomats traveled with sparring instructors and ethics philosophers. Their warships carried artists alongside tacticians. Their colonies exported as many thought models as they did minerals or tech. And perhaps most tellingly, humanity never once petitioned to revoke the original firearm ban. When asked why, Admiral Rios of the Sol Sector Alliance gave a simple answer: because it made us better. That quote would be etched into the marble entrance of the Concorde's Hall of Warfare Ethics a decade later. Humanity, once defined by bullets and gunpowder, was now remembered for blades of light and silence, for drones that fought like flocks of birds, for soldiers who danced in gravity's absence with the grace of poets and the brutality of beasts. Their legacy wasn't one of domination. It was one of transformation. They had taken a prohibition and turned it into progress. They had been mocked, restricted, underestimated, and responded not with rebellion, but with reinvention. They taught a galaxy that evolution isn't a matter of biology. It's a matter of refusal. Refusal to accept limits. Refusal to surrender ingenuity. Refusal to go quietly. And in doing so, humanity didn't just earn a place in the new galactic order. They defined it. Let me know if you want a polished version of the full story in one document, or if you'd like me to help with a cover, title card, or illustration.